took the fire lookout job to be alone, to get away from the wreckage of my life. 20 miles from the nearest road, 100 feet above the forest, I thought I'd finally found silence. But on the 8th night, a light appeared in the trees. Perfectly still, perfectly timed. Every night at 2 a.m. it returned. And every night it crept a little closer. I thought isolation would save me. I didn't know the woods were watching back. The job ad was a lifeline tossed into the churning waters of my imploded life. Seasonal fire lookout, District 3, Clearwater National Forest. It promised isolation, a wage that was more of a pittance, and a view that stretched for 100 miles. To me, it promised silence. The kind of deep, profound silence that might finally be loud enough to drown out the echoes of slammed doors, the screech of tires, and the final, clipped words of a life dismantled. My predecessor, a grizzled man named Miller, with skin like tanned leather and eyes that had seen too many sunsets, hiked out the day I hiked in. He passed me on the trail, smelling of wood smoke and whiskey. He didn't offer any advice, just a single, cryptic statement. "The woods watch back," he'd grunted, before disappearing down the switchback. I dismissed it as the folksy wisdom of a man who'd spent too long talking to squirrels. The tower was a lonely spire of steel and glass, perched atop the highest peak for miles around. It was called Eagle's Nest. A single 100-foot tall metal staircase spiraled up to a 14 by 14-foot room. A glass-walled cage suspended between the endless sky and the bristling green sea of the forest. My world was reduced to a cot, a small desk, a propane stove, and the all-important Osborne firefinder. My only link to humanity was a two-way radio connecting me to the ranger station 20 miles away, and a man named Henderson, whose voice was 90% gravel and 10% crackle. The first week was bliss, the kind of soul-cleansing solitude I'd craved. I watched thunderstorms roll in from 100 miles out, great bruised beasts stalking across the plains, and felt thrillingly small and insignificant. The wind was a constant companion, moaning through the steel struts of the tower, a sound that was at first unnerving, then comforting. I fell into a rhythm. Wake, brew coffee, scan the horizon, report in, read, scan, eat, scan, sleep. The silence worked its magic. The frantic, screaming thoughts in my head softened to a dull, manageable roar. I was healing. Then came the light. It was the 8th night. The moon was a sliver, and the stars were a brilliant, chaotic spill across the black velvet sky. I was charting a weather pattern when some movement far below caught my eye. I raised my binoculars. In a small, unnatural clearing about 5 miles to the north, a light had appeared. It was a soft, orange glow, like a campfire seen through a thick fog. But it wasn't a campfire. It didn't dance or waver. It was perfectly, unnervingly still. A single, constant pulse of orange. I checked my watch. 2 a.m. Exactly. The next morning, I radioed Henderson. "Morning, Eagle's Nest. his voice crackled. "All quiet on the western front." "Henderson, it's Alex. I had a visual on a possible campfire last night. Sector north, about 5 miles out." A pause. "No registered campers in that sector, Alex. You sure? Could be poachers." "I don't think so," I said, hesitating. It didn't behave like a fire. It was just a light. And it came on at 2 a.m. on the dot. The silence on the other end of the radio was more noticeable this time. "Copy that, Eagle's Nest. Keep an eye on it. Probably nothing. Swamp gas." There were no swamps at this elevation. The light returned the next night. 2 a.m. Same spot. The same steady, silent orange pulse. And the night after that. It became part of my routine. I'd set an alarm for 1:55 a.m, brew a cup of bitter coffee, and sit in the dark, my binoculars trained on the spot. The light would appear as if someone had flipped a switch, bathing a small circle of the forest floor in its sickly glow. It would remain for an hour, then vanish just as suddenly at 3 a.m. Reporting it to Henderson became a fool's errand. His responses went from skeptical to annoyed. "Kid, there's nothing out there. I'm looking at the satellite thermals. It's a ghost." The implication was clear. I was the one seeing ghosts. The isolation was getting to me. I might have believed him, if not for the footprints. It was after a dry thunderstorm, the kind that spattered the ground with just enough rain to turn the dust and ash into a muddy film. I went down the 100-foot spiral staircase for my weekly supply drop, winched up from the base. As I was securing the canvas bags, I saw them. A perfect set of bare footprints, pressed into the damp earth right at the base of the tower. They were slender, long-toed. They made a single, carefully planned loop around the concrete footings, and then vanished back into the impenetrable wall of pines. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Who could this have been? The supply drop was handled by a kid who drove an ATV up the old logging road, a road that ended half a mile from the tower. He never came all the way to the base. And he wore boots. I wore boots. Miller, my predecessor, wore boots. A shiver, entirely unrelated to the morning chill, began to creep all over my body. I was alone. Utterly. The nearest human being was 20 miles away. I grabbed the radio, my hand trembling. "Henderson, someone's been up here." My voice barely spilled out of my mouth. I was almost shivering. "There are footprints, barefoot." "Alex, calm down," the gravelly voice replied, but there was a new edge to it. Annoyance had been replaced by something that might have been concern, or maybe just exasperation. "The kid with the supplies probably took his boots off. Hippies, you know." "No, this is different. They circle the tower and disappear." "I'll tell you what," Henderson said, his voice taking on a tone similar to trying to humour me. "You just sit tight. Keep your eyes on the trees, not on the ground. It's the quiet that gets you. Makes you imagine things." The quiet wasn't the problem anymore. It was the sounds. The radio started acting up. It began with simple echoes. I'd make my evening report, and a few seconds later, a faint, distorted echo of my own voice would whisper back from the speaker. "Visibility clear for 50 miles. It was unnerving, but I chalked it up to atmospheric interference, a signal bouncing off the mountains. But then, it changed. One night, I was thinking about my ex-wife, about the last thing she'd ever said to me. "You just disappear, Alex, even when you're standing right here." It was a thought, nothing more. A bitter memory, replaying in the echo chamber of my skull. And then, from the radio, a whisper, just like my own voice, but strained through a sieve. "Standing right here, here, here." I froze in place. Surely I couldn't be imagining this too. I hadn't spoken. I hadn't moved my lips. I grabbed the handset. "Henderson, is that you? This isn't funny." Only white noise answered. The terror that set in was a new and insidious kind. It wasn't the fear of a bear or a mountain lion. It was the fear of my own mind turning traitor. The tower, my sanctuary, was becoming a psychological pressure cooker. The whispering from the radio grew more frequent, plucking thoughts from my head before I'd even fully started forming them. It was a violation of the deepest, most private kind. I started humming constantly, reciting state capitals, anything to fill my head with noise, so the radio would have nothing to steal. I began to feel watched, not by the indifferent wilderness, but by something specific, something with intent. I'd be scanning the horizon, and the hair on my arms would stand on end. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck that told me something was looking up, looking at me. One night, my nerves shot. I decided to confront the orange light. I set my alarm, and when the familiar glow bloomed in the darkness, I trained my most powerful binoculars on it. The light was brighter tonight, the circle of illumination wider, and in the center of that circle stood a figure. It was much taller than a normal human should be, and it had strange limbs that looked out of proportion with the rest of its body. It stood without motion, a scarecrow assembled by a madman. I couldn't make out a face, but I could see it was wearing clothes. A dark pair of pants and a jacket. A red and black checkered jacket. My red and black flannel jacket. The one I'd left hanging on a hook by the door. I didn't think my eyes could open that wide, but they did. With a surge of pure animal panic, I scrambled to the hook. It was empty. I backed away from the glass walls, feeling like a fish in a bowl. It was down there, and it had been in here. It had been in my sanctuary, my cage, and it had taken something, a trophy, a piece of me. I didn't sleep. I sat in the center of the room, on the floor, a fire axe clutched in my hands, watching the windows. The light outside vanished at its scheduled 3 a.m., but the darkness that replaced it was 100 times more terrifying. The end began the next night. It didn't start with a sound, but with a smell. The faint, acrid scent of burning pine. I jumped up to my feet in a panic. This was it. A fire. The thing I was here to watch for. I scanned the horizon in every direction. Nothing. No smoke plume. No telltale glow on the underside of the clouds. The smell grew stronger. It was coming from inside the room. I touched the wall, one of the thick wooden support beams that framed it. The wood was hot, impossibly hot. I snatched my hand back with a cry, an angry red blister already rising on my palm. I looked closer. There was no smoke, no flame, but deep within the grain of the wood, a faint orange light was pulsing, a mirror of the glow in the forest. The tower was burning from the inside out. I found myself overwhelmed by sheer panic. The metal floor plates grew warm beneath my boots. The steel door handle was too hot to touch. The spiral staircase, my only way down, would be a death trap. A heated coil ready to cook me alive. The radio crackled to life, not with a whisper, but a full-throated scream. It was my own voice, twisted and distorted, begging for help, shrieking my name over and over. I looked out the window, down to the base of the tower. The figure was there. It stood directly beneath me, its head tilted back. In the spreading orange glow emanating from the tower itself, I could see its face. And I understood. The face was mine, a perfect waxen copy of my own features. But the eyes were wrong. They weren't eyes at all. They looked like black holes, sucking in all light around them. I'd never seen anything like it in my entire life. The thing wearing my jacket and my face smiled, a slow, predatory stretching of its lips. It raised a hand and waved, a gesture of final, damning welcome. The heat was becoming unbearable. The glass of the windows began to crack and craze. I was being cooked alive. The emergency rope ladder, my last chance. It was in a metal box bolted to the floor. I kicked the lid open with my boot, my hands wrapped in my singed bedroll. The metal was searing. I smashed a window with the fire axe, with the glass exploding outwards into the night. Shards rained down on the thing below, but it didn't flinch. I hooked the ladder to the window frame and threw it out. It unrolled, slapping against the hot steel of the tower. Without a second thought, I scrambled out of the window and onto the rope ladder, my burned hands screaming in protest. The air outside was cool, a shocking relief. I didn't dare look down. I just climbed, my movements clumsy with terror. The sound of my own voice screaming from the radio above, pursuing me like a demon. I was 20 feet from the ground when the tower let go. There was no explosion, just a deep and pained groan as the superheated steel failed. The entire structure leaned, a dying giant, and then crumpled in on itself with a deafening cacophony of tortured metal. I was thrown clear, landing hard in the dirt and pine needles. I lay there, stunned, the wind knocked out of me. The wreckage of the tower glowed with that impossible, smokeless orange fire. It didn't spread to the surrounding trees. It just consumed the steel and wood, a silent, hungry inferno. In the heart of the glow, the thing with my face stood, unharmed, watching me. I scrambled to my feet, with my ankle now throbbing in pain, and ran. I fled into the blackness of the forest, the orange glow at my back, the sound of my own stolen voice echoing in my ears. A search party found me 3 days later, 5 miles from the site, huddled in a hollow log, I was dehydrated, delirious, and raving about a man with no eyes. Henderson was the one who told me the official story. I was in a clean white hospital bed that felt as alien as the surface of the moon. "Ball lightning," he said, not looking me in the eye. He stared out the window at the distant mountains. "Freak phenomenon. Superheated a pocket of air and melted the tower. You're damn lucky to be alive, Alex." "It wasn't lightning," I whispered, in a voice that didn't feel like mine. "There was a man, Henderson. There was a man wearing my face." He turned then, and for the first time, I saw something in his weary eyes beyond skepticism. It was a deep, haunted fear. The same fear that now lived in me. "There were no other tracks, kid," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Just yours, leading away from the burn site. That's all." He stood to leave, pausing at the door. Some places are just hungry. They get a taste for you." I'm back in the city now. I live in a third-floor apartment that overlooks a small park. I surround myself with noise and light. I keep the TV on all night. I haven't known a moment of true silence since I fled that forest. Because in the silence, I still hear those whispers. But the noise doesn't matter. The city lights don't matter. Because every night, if I look out of my window, I see it. It's faint, but it's there. A soft orange glow, deep among the trees of the park. It never moves. It just pulses, steady and patient. I know what's standing in that light. I know it's wearing my face. And every night, I swear, it's just a little bit closer.